I'm Jacqueline Raposo of www.thedustybaker.com. Gluten-free and allergy-alternative recipes can be a little bit frustrating and can make for one very, very messy kitchen. But I hope my updated classics and fun flavor combinations show you that with a little bit of mess, a lot of fun, and a whole lot of love, even a dusty baker can produce delectable results. Here we go. So a gluten-free mocha torte from a box. That's what we're making. We're basically taking a gluten-free dark chocolate boxed cake and we're adding some really, really delicious things to it and serving it in a really fun way, so it's going to be both decadent and extremely elegant. So I'm going to show you two ways to make it from the one mix. I have an 11-inch tart pan here that I've buttered and then dusted with cocoa powder. And then just to show you another way that you can present this, if you have multiple little pans, this is a 4-inch springform pan here. That same thing. I just buttered it and then dusted it with cocoa powder. So I'll show you two ways to serve that later. So first I'm going to take my boxed cake, and basically what I'm doing is just sort of substituting certain things in what the instructions in the back of the box say. They're all going to be different. They're going to have different blends of gluten-free flours in them. So basically any boxed gluten-free chocolate cake you can make this torte out of. So first I have the dark chocolate cake mix. To that I'm adding 1 packet of chocolate pudding mix. So far this is making it a completely dairy-free recipe. If I were going to, instead of buttering my pans, I could just use a cooking spray. This entire cake would be completely dairy-free as well. So I'm adding the pudding mix to my boxed cake mix, which basically is going to just make it that much richer and that much more chocolatey. So there we go. And then I'm adding 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. If you wanted to make this a little bit spicy, you could add some sort of chili powder or cayenne or mesquite flour to it. So that's part one of doctoring up our box mix. I'm going to leave that aside. Now the box mix that I used called for 1 1/3 cups water. Instead I'm using unsweetened almond milk. Again, that's just going to add another layer of richness to it. It's going to make a denser cake and a slightly sweeter cake because unsweetened almond milk does have a tiny bit of sweetness from the almonds themselves. The brand that I'm using does not have any sort of gum in it. Some brands, you'll notice, will have locust bean gum in them. And what locust bean gum does is just sort of help pull the milk together. And so we don't want that for our cake. So this is 1 1/3 cup of unsweetened almond milk. To that I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of instant coffee. I love adding coffee to chocolate recipes because it just gives it another layer of dimension. So we're making coffee milk. So, love coffee and chocolate. So we already have coffee and cinnamon and chocolate. So to my standing mixer, now I'm basically following the instructions on the box. So first I'm adding 2/3 cup of oil, and I'm going to start beating that together. And then 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And then my entire 1 1/3 cup of milk. I'm actually going to increase the speed to medium so that it starts emulsifying within the oil. It all comes together. Right now it's a little bit separate. It will all come together. Oh, the coffee smells so good already. And then I have 4 large eggs here that are at room temperature, and I slightly warmed my milk a little bit. For any sort of cake recipe, having your ingredients at room temperature or warm is just going to help them not shock when you put them together and into a hot oven, so that they're going to rise without rising and then falling. So I have 4 large eggs here that I'm going to put in. I cracked them all into a bowl already, but I'm going to put them in sort of one at a time. And I'm going to make sure that they're well blended in before I add them. And I'm going to make sure that they're all blended in before I add a second one. Oh, the coffee smells so good. There we go. Now all my eggs are in. I'm just going to scrape around. It's really smooth and creamy. It's got a beautiful coffee color to it. And so now I'm going to slowly add my flour mix in. Put on medium low just to be safe. I'll let it set in a little bit before I put the rest in. Come to this side. So it's almost in there, so I'm going to scrape one more time. Make sure I get all of this mix in. And I love that I can already smell the coffee and the cinnamon and the chocolate. Now I can't see any more flour, so I'm going to take my whisk off, and then I'm just going to use my spatula to make sure that everything is in the inside. Get this out of the way. So it's still a little bit lumpy, which is totally fine. There's a little bit of flour on the bottom. So for this particular recipe, because I'm using a dark metal pan, I'm preheating my oven to 325 degrees. And because this is rather wide, and because I have two sizes in the oven at the same time, I'm going to check at around 15 minutes, just to make sure, to possibly rotate, and then after that I'm going to check at around 20. So here I have 2 tablespoons of raw cacao. I'm going to put 1 tablespoon, about, you're estimating, right into the mix there, and folding that in. This gives us, again, another layer of cocoa to it, having the raw seeds in there. And then also, I'm going to sprinkle the rest on the top, and it's going to give us a great crunch too. So I'm going to very elegantly pour this into my 11-inch tart pan, right in the middle, and let it come out to the sides. And then I'm going to pour a nice little amount into my spring form as well. So it's about half to 3/4 of the way full in there. I've done this before with the entire amount of cake in the tart pan. I've done it putting some in the tart pan and some in smaller pans. They freeze really well too, which I love. So you can make some smaller ones and then freeze them. And then pop them in the microwave. I can really smell cinnamon and chocolate and coffee in here. It's great. All right. So now it's already pretty smooth. I don't have to do much actually to smooth it out. I'm just going to shake the pan a little bit and tap it, and then just sprinkle the rest of my raw cacao on top. So it's going to settle in a tiny bit. You're going to be able to see some pieces will remain on top. Some pieces will fall into it. Some of my little guy too. I like chocolate. Now I'm getting crazy. There we go. So my torts are ready to go into the oven. So like I said, 325 degrees, about 15 minutes. I'm going to check them. And then I'll know that when they're done, when they're just slightly springy in the center, but nice and firm around the outside. So our boxed cake, this one took about 35 minutes in the oven. I've used other brands that are only 18, 22 minutes. So you just want to keep an eye on the cake as it's in there. So I've plated our first one already, which I'm very excited about. I think it's a very romantic cake for 2. It's perfectly springy to the touch. I've made some fresh whipped cream literally just by putting a pint of heavy whipping cream into my mixer, and it takes 2 minutes to whip it up. I didn't even add any sugar or anything. I dusted the plate with a little bit of cocoa powder, and then on top sifted a little bit of white powdered sugar onto it. 2 dabs of whipped cream, some fruit. It's beautiful, and I'm gonna destroy it by showing you how beautiful it is inside. So there we go, right like that. So it's light and fluffy, very dark, very rich, wonderfully decadent. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Jacqueline Raposo. For more gluten-free and allergy-friendly recipes, join me at www.thedustybaker.com. Thanks.